Hi everyone, Cam here from Yes Auto, and I've been a motoring journalist for many years now, but believe it or not, I've never driven one of these, a Mazda MX-5, but obviously, clearly that all changes today. And I'm so excited to figure out whether it lives up to the legend of being pure driving nirvana, or whether it's just a little bit overhyped. All of that we're going to figure out in just a moment. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. This version of the MX-5 has actually been around for quite some time now. Although it's gone through some mechanical updates here and there, visually it's exactly the same as the one that launched a few years ago. And well, I think it's the best looking one to date. It just mixes in a really beautiful aesthetic with aggressive looks, particularly around the lights and this fantastic grille, which just gives it such a distinct face. The previous generation version of this harked all the way back to the original MX-5 from the late 1980s, and it was so good to see them take a step away with that, with this version. I love it. Now, coming further around, we've actually got 16-inch raised alloy wheels on this car. Now, these come with the R Sport version, which is a limited edition model, and unfortunately you can't spec these on the regular cars, even if you go for the top spec car. You can, however, get this paint. Now, it looks gloss from a distance, but it's actually metallic. And even on a miserable day like today, this bluey grey scheme looks, well, it's just stunning. What a really cool, aggressive look for this car. The back's a tad underwhelming in my view, but this is something that kind of goes for a lot of Mazdas today. I think the fronts look great, but the backside's not quite as much. It's not ugly, it's just a little bit more rounded and a bit softer than the front end, but still, I just think this is a great looking car. So this is a two-seater sports car, so the boot isn't going to be massive or gigantic or whatever, but it's 130 litres, and if you go for the RF, which is the Targa Top version of this, it does shrink a little bit, but they're pretty decent. I would say you could get one medium-sized suitcase in there or a couple of overnight bags. So I don't think you're going to be able to go around southern France for a week in this thing, or 2 weeks, but you could probably go and take it off somewhere for a nice weekend getaway. And one thing I wanted to point out while I was here is that you've actually got this quite big physical aerial, which is just hilarious. I don't think I've really seen one of these since the early 2000s. Anyway, to the engine. I've pre-popped the bonnet open, so this should be nice and easy. And it is! So, under the bonnet, we've got two engines to choose from. The one I've got here is a 1.5 litre petrol engine developing 130 brake horsepower and 150 newton meters of torque, and of course power is sent to the rear wheels. There is, however, a slightly faster version, which is a 2 litre motor producing 181 brake horsepower and 205 newton meters of torque. However, that only applies to cars made in late 2018 onwards. Any that were before that actually produced 151 bhp, but still, it's still the fastest one to go for. Now, all of these roadster cars come with 6-speed manual gearboxes, but you can actually go for an automatic if you go for one of the RF models. But come on, it's a two-seater sports car. You've got to go for the manual, right? Now, getting in the MX-5 is actually a bit of a challenge, not because it's low down, but because it's just a little bit cramped in here. So I'm just under 6 foot. I'm not the tallest person in the world, but still, I'm not short, and I can adjust the seat backwards and forwards, but I can't go up and down. So I actually feel like if I sit up straight, I'm sat on top of the car a little bit. So if you were 6 foot and above, you might feel like you're sitting in a toy car. Now, on these newer models, that's 2018 and onwards, you can actually adjust the steering wheel backwards and forwards. But the thing is, if I have it in my ideal driving position, which is around about here, well, let me move the seat forwards a bit, around about here, my legs actually hit the steering column. So when I get in and out of the car, it's just a little bit of a faff. It's not the end of the world though. It's kind of something that you would expect with an MX-5 because it is a small two-seater sports car. But if you're a bit of a giant, then getting in and out of the car might just be a bit of a pain. So you can get behind the wheel of an MX-5 for as little as £24,000. Now that gets you the SEL, which comes with the 1.5 litre engine, the same as the one that we've got in this car. But you can spend all the way up to about £30,000 for the GT Sport Tech. And that comes with the bigger 2-litre motor, as well as a bit more leather in the cabin for a more premium, luxurious feel. The car I have here, as I mentioned earlier, is the R Sport. Now that was a limited edition car that cost around about £27,000, and you get those raised alloy wheels plus this beautiful burgundy leather interior, which you can't unfortunately spec on any other models. Sad news is they don't make it anymore. They sold out of them quite quickly. But if you head over to yesauto.com, you might be able to find a deal on a nearly new or used version. What's pretty good though is that no matter which one you go for, you get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto thrown in for free. And it's all accessed through this rather dinky little infotainment screen. And to be honest, it's feeling a little bit old-fashioned because it's Mazda's old infotainment software, but it does the job in this car. You're going to be too busy driving to really care about what's going on here. Now this might be quite a small car, but we've got lots of little places to go and tuck stuff away. So we've got a little tray down here where you can put a smartphone along with 2 USB ports. Those are regular USB and not USB-C. There's also an aux-in, which is hilarious. So if you haven't bought your USB cable along, but an aux cable, and you've got a headphone jack on your phone, then you can plug it in here and listen to music. Or if you're really old school, you could plug in an iPod. Remember what they were? And you can just whack it in the center console there. A bit further back, there's a small tray underneath the armrest here. It's not that big. There's actually 2 coin holders in here. Again, do people use coins? But if they do, there's a couple of coin holders as well as a place to put your keys. I tend to put the keys in there when I'm driving, otherwise it rattles around a little bit. Now, a little further back, we've got 2 cup holders that actually seem like they're quite inconveniently placed, but when you're driving, it's actually quite easy to just reach back and grab your drink. There's a CD player back here as well, so you can bring CDs along. It's like stepping back in time. And then above that is it's kind of like a safe. So this is probably the replacement of the glove compartment, because there isn't a traditional glove compartment down here. It's a bit small, but it can be locked, so you could go on a heist or something and store the loot in there. Anyway, looks like it's about to start chucking it down with rain, so I'm going to whack the roof back on. I have to admit, when I first got in the MX-5, I wasn't blown away. I was a little bit underwhelmed by the performance, and I know that we're in the 130 brake horsepower car, the slower one, but I just thought it was a tad on the lethargic side. Everything felt just quite slow. The gear change, the gears felt really long. And so I found it quite hard to enjoy at low speed. But the more I've driven it, the more I realise that the MX-5 requires a slightly different driving style. And when you crack it, it's so much fun. I've come to really, really love this car. So what it does, particularly in this model where it's not the fastest, it really requires momentum. So if you're on a really fun B road, instead of going through the gears all the time, what you want to do is just try and keep it in a certain power band. Try and keep it at a certain speed. And try and carry that momentum through the corners. And when you do, it becomes so rewarding, because as you're doing that, you're actually thinking more about the way you drive. It's a bit like driving an electric car where you're trying to think really hard to try and save and eke out a bit more energy. So speaking of that engine, let's talk about it. Most of the time when I'm buying a car, I think, give me the fastest engine that's possible, because I'm a big child and I like going fast and I spend too much money on fuel. But this thing, this 1.5 litre motor is such a peach. So again, not only do you have that fun of trying to carry the momentum through corners and really think about the way you drive this car, it sounds great. When you really put your foot down, it's got this really nice barky growl to it. Now, I've not driven the 2 litre motor, and people do say that it is you know, a noticeable step up in performance. So if overtaking stuff is something that you do often, then the 2 litres the one to go. But in terms of character, I've read that this one is a little bit better, and I'm finding it really hard to deny that. I think it's so cool. And when I talk about carrying that momentum, I don't mean that it feels slow. This car really just loves to play. It's got a really nice darty front end with really responsive steering, if a little bit on the lifeless side. And the back end, if you really throw it about, will absolutely want to step out on you. Now, we've got to talk about this gear change as well, because it is so good. It just feels really mechanical, like I'm physically changing the cogs, but it's got a nice short throw to it as well. So flicking through the gears is dead easy, and it just means that you're always engaged with the car, even at low speed. Just simple change from second to third is deeply satisfying. It sounds so good. And you know, the kind of overriding character of this car is one of an old school British sports car. It feels like a modern car in the sense that I've got all the cabin feels really wonderful, and I've got technology in here, but the way it drives is really old school in the best way possible. It's traditional. Now, we know the MX-5 works brilliantly on a B road, but it's also got to do the same on a motorway, because, well, a lot of the time you've got to drive to B roads. Let's say you want to go away for the weekend to Scotland to go and drive on the North Coast 500, or do the same thing in Cornwall, go for a nice drive around the rural roads there. You're going to need to spend a lot of time on the motorway. But the good thing is that while it's a little bit noisy in here, we've got a fair bit of road noise, a little bit of wind noise, the MX-5 works really well on a motorway. So we've also got a little bit of tech, a little bit, to help us on motorway journeys as well. So I've got cruise control. It's not active cruise control though, so it doesn't adjust the speed depending on the speed of the car in front of you. And there's also some form of lane assistance, but it's merely to just tell you when you've gone over the white lines, and it can be turned off nice and easily by just pushing a button down by my right knee. But it won't actually position the car back into your lane. But overall, the MX-5 is surprisingly good on a motorway. Sure, it's not as good as, let's say, a proper dedicated GT coupe or something like that, but still, it's bearable to get from point A to point B, so long as point B is a really good B road. So let's sum up this MX-5. Let's go through the likes and dislikes, and I want to start with the dislikes. I'm not a massive fan of the driving position because A, I feel like I'm sat on top of the car a little bit, and I think if you're 6 foot or over, you might feel like you're in a bit of a toy car. And also, my knee hits the steering column when getting in and out of it. But that's about it really. I love everything else about the MX-5. I love the sound it makes when you're really on it. I love the steering, and that even though it's a little bit numb, it translates really well to what the front wheels are doing. I love how direct it is. I love how playful it is. And I think, crucially, it's just so much fun no matter how fast you're going. If you're going relatively slowly, it's a bag of laughs. If you've really got your foot down, it really does demand your concentration. But if you're not a massive driving fan, and you just want something that looks cool and is fun to drive, it's dead easy to get into and just start having fun with it. So, if you've been thinking about an MX-5 and you just need a little bit of a nudge, I hope I can be that nudge, because I would love it if you headed over to yesauto.com right now and picked up an MX-5 because they are so good to drive and absolutely lived up to the hype. What a great car.